Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Voice of College Football for a call-in show here on a Monday night, July 5th, 9 o'clock Eastern Time, 6 o'clock there on the West Coast. We don't forget about you Pac-12 fans. Of course not. And we'll have some Pac-12 coverage coming your way very soon in the midst of an untimely death, unfortunately, from Terry Donahue at age 77. We just got off the line with Tony Siracusa from Last Word on College Football. Please check out that video as soon as we get that posted in a few hours. Tony, again, as usual, with some insightful commentary concerning one of the legends of the Pac-12, and in fact, the all-time winningest coach in the Pac-12. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Yes, we've got a topic for the night, but as always, we invite you to leave your comments, your questions, your debate topics in the comments section. I will respond to anything concerning the game we love, and of course, we'll take your calls concerning anything under the guise of college football. 860-499-3332. But as always, I have served up a topic. I've been mistaken. I have clearly been mistaken, despite the unfortunate hours and hours and hundreds of hours and thousands of hours, and who knows beyond that, tens of thousands of hours of my life that I've spent either in person, but mostly on my couch watching football. I was unaware. Call me ignorant. Call me completely unaware. To be kind. Just call me unaware and ignorant, because we could go off even deeper than that of how badly I've been mistaken all this time about what I was actually watching. I've been in the sports industry now for 30 plus years, at the local level, at the national and international level of the television industry. I've been here, of course, for the past 7, 8, 9 years, something in that range, talking college football with you, talking football with you. I'm almost embarrassed to talk about all the head knowledge I've got on the NFL in particular concerning rosters and scores and championship games and storylines throughout the history of the league, because I was mistaken about what football is. I have no idea what this spectacle we watch each and every weekend during the fall and winter actually is. What is football? Well, we needed the NFL to tell us what football is. We apparently needed the NFL. The NFL, the mighty NFL. So arrogant, so incredibly entitled and arrogant to tell us what football is. I've got some words for the NFL. Are they listening? Probably not. I am merely the voice of college football, so probably not listening to me because I have yet to be drafted to the NFL level. And yes, we've got a call coming in. Give me just a second. I'm starting to get a lather up on this one. So someone recently shared with me a commercial that's been produced by the NFL. Black screen, no real graphics, no video, a very direct message sent by the NFL. Football is, and for a few brief seconds, we get to choose. We get to fill in the blank. We get to conjecture or predict what is going to be sent our way, what message is coming in our direction. Football is blank. I don't have the list of items in front of me. It's been a few days since I've seen it, but we then are bombarded with a social agenda. Why? Well, I could conjecture why. There's clearly just exactly that, an agenda by the professional sports leagues. I don't get it. So there are so many wrongs here. I'll have to take them one by one. Okay. First of all, regardless of how you feel about what the NFL then told us what football is all about, it's first of all standing on a moral high ground to let us know what its values are. Number two, it's telling us what to believe, what to place our value in. Number three, it's inaccurate. Number four, the NFL is not football. The NFL has no right to tell us what football is. The NFL is a portion of football, one level of football. The NFL is not pee-wee football, recreational football, flag football, high school football, college football, and a number of other variations of football played in the United States. The NFL is a league that plays the game of football that was invented and developed before there was an NFL. But the NFL has taken it upon itself to tell us what football is. And then they go on to push a social agenda that, again, should have nothing to do with our enjoyment of entertainment, especially since the individuals that they are endearing themselves to make up a tiny, minute portion of their fan base. And for a message that I'm guessing, I'm going to step out there and merely guess that the NFL is trying to embrace. They're trying to send in a message of let's embrace everyone, as it states near the end of the commercial. I believe one of the last lines, maybe the last line, is football is for everyone. Okay. I think we could fill in the blanks with a number of segments of the population that make up much greater, larger fan bases that I would be able to argue are much more significant, not individually, but as a whole. I'm not talking about their individual significance or value as people. We're all the same. We're all created equal. But I'm talking about individually, or I'm talking about collectively. What if I made this statement? What if I made this statement? Football is male. Would I be wrong? I would have no issue if somebody challenged somebody else who said football is male, because football is not necessarily male. There are women's leagues out there. Football is primarily male. This is not an attack or a sexist statement that I'm making. It's just fact in regards to the football that we all enjoy as entertainment. It's obviously played by males. That's a fact. I would have no issue with the inclusion of women in that statement, though, as fans. Without fans, we don't have football at the level that we do. These guys are playing on some sandlot and nobody's paying attention, and they've got to work down at the corner drugstore or convenience store or gas station. So actually, you as fans, us as fans, we give the game significance, because without us supporting the sport, oh, is football a sport, actually? I had some crazy notion that it was a sport. I'm sorry. Game, sport. I was going in that direction. That's where my mind was, that this is actually kind of an inanimate entity, football. I didn't know that it had opinions. But without us, the fans, football actually, in the way we know it, doesn't exist. It needs support. It needs money. It needs financial backing to exist. And for these individuals who are talented, but in many cases, misguided, for them to earn millions and millions of dollars, obviously has to take the advertising dollars and the ticket revenue and all the other things that come into play to support the sport. So the game that is watched, the football that is watched, is played by males. Would I want that to be communicated or promoted? I don't. The value of the females who are football fans and participate in football, play football, flag football, or women's leagues, tackle leagues, I don't want that to be discounted if we're just talking about all of football. So it would be an inaccurate statement collectively for me to make that statement, but it's much more accurate than some of the statements that the NFL made. And again, why is the NFL speaking for all of football? How NFL, how arrogant you are. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. So fill it in. Fill in the blank of what football is to you and what it means to you. So I will get to the calls in just a second. I appreciate the calls coming in, but I would like to finish a few points here because I went on Twitter and I was curious to see what the feedback would be if I sent out the quote, "The NFL is blank." The NFL is blank. What kind of responses did I get? These are the responses that I get. That the NFL is too much here on Twitter. The NFL is political. The NFL is not in Iowa. The NFL is trash. The NFL is boring. The NFL is boring. The NFL is gay. And so the NFL is certainly in agreement with this statement, at least on the surface, because that was one of the categories in which it was promoting. The all-inclusive NFL took about 3 to 5% of the population to boost up there and didn't acknowledge the rest of us. The rest of us were slighted. We were ignored. We are ignored. And you would have to go on my Twitter feed to see what was posted by Jay Hinton that puts into much clearer context his thoughts and feelings about that statement. The NFL is gay. The NFL is trash. The NFL is long live college football. Don't know that grammatically fits, but that was the statement served up by one Steve Levy. We have the NFL is too far left. The NFL is boring. The NFL is dead to me. The NFL is LOL. And one person in particular went on to explain that they've given up on the NFL for the past 3 or 4 years for such reasons, because the NFL is telling us what's important, what's not important, acknowledging certain people and not other people. And the NFL is above all else. Again, I just go back to the thought that the NFL is just rather arrogant. I will get to your calls in just a second. Let me make one point as well. So we here at the Voice of College Football, what are we? The Voice of College Football is blank. You know what the Voice of College Football is? Even though I personally have my preferences in life, I have my values in life. And when there is occasion in which I am asked about my values, or there is an appropriate time and place to communicate those values, I think many of you who have watched me for a long time understand where my values lie. but we're here to talk college football. The NFL is there to play football and entertain us, not to tell us what to think, how to believe, what to feel. The NFL, that's not the purpose of the NFL. I will go to a counselor to do that. I will speak with my kids. I will read a Bible. I will do those things to determine value systems and to communicate value systems to those people that I love. I don't need the NFL doing that. NFL, you're moronic, is what you are. The NFL is moronic. The voice of college football, we talk football here. Cheryl does an amazing job in keeping track of our live chat as a moderator, and is certainly in one mind with me that we keep out trash talking and condescending talk concerning gender, politics, race, religion, all those things. Have we had to discuss those things on occasion because they have become so pervasive within college football? Yes. So I don't run away from those things, but we are all football fans that talk about football. So the voice of college football, you will never see anything that follows that statement. The voice of college football is blank that has anything to do with anything outside of football. Now, hopefully we do that in a manner which ultimately is classy, is of character, of integrity, and gives glory to the Almighty. That's my ultimate mission. But I do not push my values on anyone because we are talking about college football. I guarantee that I'll get off this live stream tonight and I will think of about 83 other things I would like to say about this. But we'll go to the phone lines. I appreciate everybody's patience because we don't necessarily need to talk about this, but I will review the comments and the questions in the live chat because I want to get your responses. You can certainly fill in the blank as well. Here it is. Football is, how about fun? How about fun? Football is fun. And again, let's start with facts, accuracy. Football is a sport, a game that doesn't have a value system or a belief system or an agenda, a social agenda that actually causes, much like what's going on in this country, to divide us with the appearance to unify us, but really with the cause and the purpose and the mission to divide us. All right. Appreciate everybody who's on the line waiting. Let's hit our first call here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's DeAndre. How you doing, bro?
DeAndre, what's going on, man?
I'm not gonna. I want to make sure I go back and look at what you're talking about.
Yeah.
About the NFL because I didn't see it.
I
will say this.
I'm sorry, DeAndre. Let me just say that, yeah, for anybody who's watched it, I think you can easily find it if you go on YouTube and just say the NFL says football is blank, something like that. You will find it easily. If I had the resources here and I wouldn't get slammed for copyright infringement, I would play it here. So, yeah, go right ahead. But, DeAndre, you can bring up anything regarding college football. We don't have to go down this path for the next 2 or 3 hours.
Well, no. I'm just going to say this, and you know me and you. We've never met before in person. We probably could sit in a bar and talk about college football for hours in the history of college football, and that's a good thing about sports. It brings us together. But when we go home to our houses or to our jobs, we bring our belief system into what we think might be true because of a person's looks or skin color or anything. I think I told you the story. I was driving, my car broke down, but some guys with a Confederate flag on their car helped me out. You know, I'm in the South, and I'm looking like, wow, should I accept help from these guys? Or should I be out here in the cold and the rain? And they were really good guys. But because they had that Confederate flag, I looked at stuff. And when I look at football as, football is a game changer for social rights. Because let's be honest, and we go with all sports, basketball, Dean Smith at Carolina, would have the game changed that much, African Americans coming to those schools, if football or other sports weren't around. Because people who went to those schools want to brag and say, I won against Auburn that weekend. So we got to get better athletes here. So what Bear Bryant did, as you already know, they brought in Sam Cunningham from Southern Cal, and he ran up and down their backside. And he said, and what happened? They started allowing. Dean Smith at Carolina, he was losing to Duke State. Then he said, I got to get some African American players. So what happened? Dean Smith goes down as his icon because he got blacks to play down here. I mean, I'm just saying, sports is a game changer because at the end of the day, there's about only 2 hours that a lot of us can sit down and talk and get along. 2 or 3 hours. I'm just saying, that's what I look at sports as. And some instance, in this escape for that day of your daily life or the grind of the day. If you're a Cowboy fan, still a fan, or Redskins fan, whoever you are, it's an escape. And I love the sport. But that's also on him to talk about, because I want to go look at the film before so I can see what you're talking about. But that's why I look at football as being sports, period.
Yeah, real
just
quick.
Like young ladies just got in there.
Real quickly,
Ahead,
Andre, before you continue and move on to something else, I will just let you know, unless I'm mistaken, because I've not memorized every word that is brought forth in that promotional ad, I don't believe there's anything racial there. I don't think there's anything racial there. So just to let you know,
I want to go back and look at
there
it.
might have been something in there that I missed, but that wasn't necessarily my point there. But I appreciate it, DeAndre.
I know you well enough. We got a very good relationship, and I wouldn't donate to your channel if I thought you were anything but a great guy.
Thank you, sir.
And
I appreciate that.
Donating.
And that's very kind of you
to
say. And again, we stick to the football and so forth. And that doesn't mean, as you well know, when certain things were going on in this country that were not pretty and still go on, I don't want to ignore them just because the fervency is past. But of course, we know we're talking about last summer that when I felt as though it had become so heavy and so prevalent that it crossed the line and became a major force in college football, then we addressed it. And I addressed it with a lot of white but primarily because of obviously the issues, black individuals that I respect and know, and brought them on because I wanted them to be able to speak their piece and I wanted to be able to learn and understand from them.
Right. So, but I wasn't calling to talk about that. I just heard you talk about it. Y'all had a big son at Ohio State. I can't pronounce his name. KT or JT something?
You can just go with JTT. Yep.
Okay. I wonder about Clemson recruiting. Not saying they're having a bad recruiting cycle, but if we go back and look at Clemson's draft picks at defensive end compared to Ohio State, the Bozer brothers, Chase Young, I don't know if they have somebody go this year, but they have been doing a very good job developing these defensive ends. Then you look at Beasley, Lawson, Farrell struggling. Is this starting to affect Clemson? Because if you look at some of the people that Clemson has lost out on, like Furman, Formore, Xavier Thomas is not living up to expectations, and Kevin Henry, people forget, was a top 10 pick. I know Miles Murphy had a very good year last year, but I'm wondering if it's going to start affecting Clemson's recruiting. I know stars really don't mean much, but that's what people look at when you get out there. So I wonder if it's going to start having a negative effect on Clemson's recruiting. as far as defense and defensive tackle. Because if you go look at right now, we were supposed to be in the league for Shaw out of Greensboro. It was Greensboro Grizzlies, and now I'm hearing that it's coming down to Carolina and Georgia. So do you think that what happens in the NFL has a negative effect on what happens at the college as far as recruiting, like Ohio State doing the things that they're doing for their defensive ends compared to what Clemson defensive ends are doing in the NFL?
I think that there would have to be a trend that would have to be too large to ignore on the negative side for that to be held up against Clemson as for any rival coach to negatively recruit against Clemson to say, look at this defensive talent that they brought in from high school football and they just don't develop them and they turn out to be busts. I would think that would have to be overwhelming. I think Ohio State's been able to capitalize on the three players that you mentioned being just overwhelming successes at the NFL level early in their careers for that to be a positive. I don't know why JTT, because he's from the state of Washington, his three other schools of interest were all Pac-12 schools. Why the connection to Ohio State and why Ohio State caught his eye and that relationship was built. Of course, they're a national brand.
Look at it recruited. Yeah. I mean, look at development. I mean, and look, I know what they're walking into these things and saying, these homes are saying. Look at what we done did compared to the three schools that you named. Oregon just started getting better. I mean, maybe Jordan. I can't tell you last time Oregon had a successful defensive player in the NFL. If we want to count Jordan as successful. I mean, Washington maybe have one or two, but they're not being a defensive school. Southern Cal, they just getting back on their feet. So, I don't know. Second question I had to ask you. Athlon, how do they come up with their rankings for football, for position groups? Because I heard you talking to Jason Priestley, who y'all both do a very good job. And he said some of the same stuff I say on my show. But Clemson offensive line is supposed to be the fourth best in the ACC in the country.
Yes.
But Clemson's receiver group is not ranked in their top 10. And I give it to Oklahoma, Southern Cal, Ohio State, definitely. I think Alabama might have been fourth. But you tell me Clemson doesn't have one of the top 10 receiving groups in the country. So I wonder how they came up with that. The Clemson offensive line outside of the Madden has not proven themselves to be that good. Even Clemson's running back group is number 9 in the country, and they don't have a proven running back. So I wonder how Aflac comes up with that.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and look to see if there's an explanation of how they create those rankings. I will say that there's obviously track record. So you look at the players that are coming back, you look at their production, look at how good they are, then you got to project. So for example, Bryce Young has done nothing at the collegiate level for us to think anything of him. Basically, he's played some garbage time and he's thrown about 5 passes. That's all he's done. But
right.
I will rate and did rate Bryce Young as roughly a top 10 quarterback. I forget where I placed him, 9th, 11th, something like that. So I'm projecting. I'm making a projection based on my knowledge of how good Nick Saban is, Bill O'Brien, the quarterbacks that they put in place, the quarterbacks in front of him being a 5-star, his performance at the spring game, him being able to hang on to the job and basically be given, I won't say given, that he earned the starting quarterback position at Alabama. So he must be blank. So I'm making a projection. So he's done nothing to earn or substantiate that he's a top 10 quarterback in the country, except for all those are indicators that he will be the next in line to fulfill that kind of promise. So I think Athlons is doing some of the same. They're saying, okay, Clemson has this coming back on the offensive line. And if you just look at what they've got coming back on the offensive line, maybe it's the 25th best offensive line in the country. But then they're saying, okay, well, then they recruited A, B, and C, and they'll have this kind of factor, which won't be that heavy of a factor from the 2021 class. But then these players should develop into better players and should just be coached up. And they're just, I think the name Clemson certainly gives them a boost. It shouldn't, but gives them a boost.
Yeah, because what I was thinking was that if we go back and look at it, if you go by just projections, I mean, you got Justin Ross assuming that he's going to be good, and that's part of projecting. Then you got two guys that were constantly injured who were compared to Sammy Watkins, Fred Latson, and Joe DeGata. And then you had E.J. Williams, who won the top place. Now, when you say busted in the top five, no. But if you compare the, I ain't gonna lie to you, I don't know who's on Iowa State or the Nevada's roster, but you can't tell me that they have more talent than Clemson does. I mean, just off of what Justin Ross did his freshman and sophomore year, you can't tell me they got that much any more talent than Clemson does. I'm just saying this by what we talk about projection. If you go look at who would you want in the NFL compared to what they're gonna put in there, and their talent base. So I was just wondering. It was just a quick question that I asked you about. So I was bored one night. So I wanted to know. We talk about South Carolina football a lot, and South Carolina football. Everybody thinks they underachieve. I don't know how much you follow college basketball. So I was looking for the equivalent of South Carolina football in college basketball, who was equal to them. And the school that I came up with, like, again, I don't know if you follow college basketball like that, but I came up with Southern Cal. Because if you think about it, they're in Los Angeles. They have a large segment of basketball talent around them, and they haven't won a conference championship since 1985. And this last run in NCAA was their farthest run. So I was wondering, do you have a comparison? And do you think that's a good comparison between the two?
A comparison for South Carolina in college basketball?
Yeah, Southern Cal.
Yeah, I understand Southern Cal, and that makes sense. I would say from the late 70s up until the mid 2000s, I could sit here and talk college basketball with anybody, but for the last 15 years, I haven't watched much, haven't paid much attention, especially in the last 10 years. And so I really don't know. But yeah, USC is always underachieved in college basketball based on just exactly what you just said. And it's not even football where you need droves and droves of players. You only need a collection of some serviceable players.
Yeah.
And then you need a couple of great players or near great players, obviously, to shoulder the load. And then you need role players who are good, decent, and they can't even come up with that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was just wondering, I mean, so South Carolina, I mean, I looked it up. South Carolina's budget is bigger than Clemson's when it comes to sports. And I was shocked Louisville is too, but South Carolina is in a good recruiting spot, and South Carolina mainly gets the best players out of South Carolina to come there. Then you still got Georgia and North Carolina. Jacksonville, where the Marine base is, and Fort Bragg, where I live at, has produced, Brad Edwards, Darnell Wolford, and people like that. So there's no shortage of talent around this area that came out of the Fayetteville area. Jeff McCall, several other, Bracy Walker. So I just wonder why, because it's closer to South Carolina. It's closer to Columbus than Clemson is, and South Carolina has always been bad. Then I thought about it. I said, well, what school does this in college basketball? I still love college basketball. Even if I don't like the trend that it's going, then sometimes I'll tune in and watch it. And I'm like, wow, Southern Cal is just like South Carolina basketball. And people will come back and say, well, that's because it had to do with UCLA. But doesn't mean they shouldn't still be decent, though.
So, yes, am I missing something there?
About.
Maybe somebody in the chat can enlighten me to some program out there, because I bring this up from time to time when South Carolina is brought up, that I can not come up with another school that has a football history like South Carolina, with the fan base, the resources, the money, and the recruiting footprint that South Carolina has. I think they are unlike anybody else in the country in underachievement all time, because basically they've never been any good outside of a 3-year span under Steve Spurrier, where they won 11 games 3 consecutive years, still didn't win a conference championship. That was the highlight. That's the all-time highlight of South Carolina football. And basically they've been winning 50-some% of their games. I'm going to go in that range, and never a conference championship in the SEC. They won a conference championship in the ACC, correct? One? And that's it.
1969, I believe. Right. So, Mark, I'll let you go. But let me ask you this real fast. I was watching an interesting video about the spread. And, they broke it down how it evoluted from Ohio State. I mean, from not Ohio State, but football high school coach in Ohio State in California, and evolution lies to Ohio. But it brought up BYU, and we talk about blue bloods. Should BYU be mentioned in the blue bloods because they were the first one to have passing trees like they were in the 70s with Nolan Chow, and I can't remember the other guys, but they were the ones that started having those type of passing trees. With LaVell Edwards and them.
So you're talking about because of Gifford Nielsen and Robbie Bosco and Jim McMahon and Steve Young and LaVell Edwards offense from the passing game.
Right.
Yeah, in that little category, you could call BYU a passing blue blood if you want to get that specific about who helped the proliferation of the passing game. But sometimes I'm surprised, DeAndre, when I go back and look at statistics into the 70s and back into the 60s, from time to time I'm a bit surprised at, I'll have to come up with specific examples in the future, but some teams that did throw the ball pretty well earlier than we usually give these teams credit.
Florida,
Warren Moon, Washington,
right?
Those USC teams in the late 70s, early 80s, with Paul McDonald at quarterback, in particular, throwing to a group of wide receivers. Lynn Swann obviously was before Paul McDonald, but those two examples come to mind. But BYU would be at the forefront of the passing game. Bill Walsh was at Stanford. This is in the early to mid 70s that he was at Stanford with Jim Plunkett. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers to see, and of course they would be ugly numbers compared to what we're used to seeing now. But still, they threw the football.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I'll tell you, man. But hey, I'll let other people get a chance to talk. And I'm going to look at that NFL. What's called? The funny thing is, Mark, we all talk about capitalist society, but you talk about one of the most socialist societies is the NFL, because they don't want nobody to be better than the other one, and they share money. Ain't that crazy?
I got you, man. No question about it. All right, DeAndre, I appreciate it.
All right.
Have a good one. Our man DeAndre on the line talking college football history, as he typically does, which is right in my wheelhouse. I could talk that all night. Let's move on to our next phone call. And again, if you're looking for the conversation that pertains to the title of tonight's call-in show, I had everything basically that I had to say and got it out of my system within the first 10 or 15 minutes. So please check it out once the video posts, but I'll certainly respond to any comments and questions in the live chat and the phone calls as well. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hunter from Alabama.
Hunter, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you tonight?
I'm good. What's
I'd
up?
like to briefly comment on your opening topic. I'm been very, very disappointed in the way that the NFL has gone about things in the last few years. To me, football is about an escape from reality, escape from your job, escape from all the political nonsense that's going on, that we are just constantly bombarded with. And to see the NFL go in this direction to where they're taking social issues now and shoving it down people's throats has really turned me off to the NFL. I still watch the NFL, and after this, I don't know if I'm gonna watch this year, because I feel like for me, this is I've seen the video, and I think this is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back for me.
It's interesting that you say that, Hunter, because I'm sorry to cut you off, but what you just stated rings very true for me as well, because as we've headed down this path with the NFL, I cringe and I get uncomfortable and I don't like what I see, and I don't like having certain messages shoved down my throat when, again, this is entertainment, as you mentioned and said it more eloquently than I. It's an escape. It's an escape for the American people. And for them to shove down the agenda down our throats, I've been able to push it off and still enjoy the games. But once I saw that, I thought, just the arrogance and audacity of this, regardless of what stand they're taking, just to shove values down people's throats. I feel very much the same way that you do, that might be the end for me.
I totally agree. And without getting too political here, I would just say this. You've seen it within the last few years as well, where the NFL ratings have gone down tremendously. And when you have all of these corporate companies, and now it's looking into sports, where all of this wokeism is turning people off. And I think the majority of the fan bases of the NFL are going to be turned off by it. And so, with that being said, I think I'll switch to a different topic, because I get very aggravated and I get kind of fired up about this kind of thing. But that's kind of my take.
I appreciate that.
My question, switching to college football now. My question for you tonight. We have the debate, every so often of who's RBU, who's DBU. But I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and this gentleman is a Georgia fan, and we were kind of jokingly going back and forth about who is DBU. And so let's take the last 5 seasons just as a backdrop in the context of into that conversation. Who do you feel is DBU within the last few years?
So you bring up one great distinction, Hunter, because anytime somebody brings this type of argument or debate to me and says, okay, Mark, let's have a debate, or I heard you say this, let's debate, or wants me to answer this question, you've got to put it into, what do you want this argument to be? Do you want this to be all time? So you gave it context within the last 5 years. So that's great. Number one. Number two, I often divide or ask that individual that wants me to comment, do you want me just to look at performance on the field in college, or are we looking at the production at the NFL level for those individuals?
I would say both.
Okay.
Both production on the field and, traction in the NFL. Because I think there's this.
The last 5 years, I think that there are 3 schools in the conversation in the last 5 years, and I think it starts with Ohio State, LSU, and Alabama at defensive back. Did I lose Hunter? Uh-oh. How did that happen? Hunter, you with me? I have somehow lost my call. Dropped. The system dropped on us here. Let's see if we can get it back. My apologies to Hunter. I don't know. The phone
Thank you for calling Collins Studios.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Let's get it back. There may
that
be
was an
issues
invalid number.
There might be
Please
issues.
re-enter your show.
There might be issues at times that I'm receiving a phone call at the same time that we're on our call-in system, but that shouldn't have anything to do with it.
Thank you for calling Collins Studios host.
I was getting a personal call in at the same time.
Thank you for calling Collins Studios host and call screener line. Please enter your. That was an invalid number. Please re-enter your show or meeting number, followed by the pound key. That was an invalid.
Okay. One more time.
Thank you for calling Collins Studios host and call screener. Enter your 6-digit PIN number. Welcome, host. You are now in the host room and can manage your callers from the Collins Studio web interface.
Hunter, call us back. I apologize. The line just dropped. Had a great question about DBU. Yes, the schools that come to mind for me based on production on the field in the last 5 years, because if we go all time, then we're opening it up to Florida State, Miami, Texas, USC. Yeah. Last 5 years, I don't think anybody can talk other than Ohio State, Alabama, and LSU about producing defensive backs. Hunter, if you can hear me, please call back. We'll take the next call, though, here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark. How you doing? This is Emmanuel from Houston.
Emmanuel, what's going on?
Not much. You know me, I've always have the most random questions.
Bring 'em.
But to answer your question, football is sport. It's entertainment. Football is business. And my question for you is, since you know everything about college football, I'd like to know, everybody talks about how the game's evolving. And my question was, does it really evolve, or does it just go through phases? And will Smash Mouth football come back?
Well, I appreciate that I know everything. Unfortunately, I don't, but I've done my best in the past. Unfortunately, the memory's not what it used to be, but I appreciate that, Emmanuel. What was your second comment? You talk about forgetting. What was your second comment after you made that comment? Because I wanted to speak to that as well. Oh, about football being a business. Oh, football. So yeah. I would normally agree with you. And that would be something, if it was stated 10 years ago by somebody that football is a business, everybody would grumble and say, yeah, unfortunately, it's become a business. It's too business-like. But at least I could understand that. I can understand the NFL making decisions based on dollars and cents. But I don't think that that's the incentive or the motive here. It actually doesn't make good business sense. If they were just running a business,
Well, yeah.
to not offend people and just stay out of it and just deliver football, then they wouldn't be conducting themselves the way that they are now. Yeah, this has gone beyond business. You would have thought, I would have thought my entire lifetime that the almighty dollar would have ruled sports, would have ruled the motion picture industry, that's all that mattered. They just want to make money. But it's gone beyond that. They're pushing other agendas that actually are losing money.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I was going to blame, ESPN or whatnot, but the NFL does it too. So there's a larger machine behind it, so to speak, or it is a corporation. I mean, basically, college football is the feeder to the NFL, and the NFL puts out the main product. But yeah, it's a giant corporation, headed out by the CEO Roger Goodell. So, and that's why we're running into these issues with the college football, with the students now being able to actually make money off of their image.
Yes.
It's going to be interesting times how the sport changes soon.
So, Emmanuel, now to get to your final point about football either evolving or just moving in cycles concerning the style of play, I just can't imagine that we would see football revert to a smash mouth type of game for a number of reasons. Because consider, even though there are cycles, I can't imagine that certain cycles are going to reverse, though. For example, the population shift in this country going back to the 1980s has gone from the North and the Northeast and people living in those regions moving to the South and moving west. It's going to have to take major shifts in industry and people's preferences to change that. When it comes to the evolution of the game on the field, we're talking about a trend that goes all the way back to, I'd say, the late 70s. The late 70s, right at the time that I started watching college football, we got our first real glimpse in a handful of teams out there, and it was mentioned earlier by DeAndre, BYU, Lavelle Edwards, Gifford Nielsen, Robbie Bosco, Jim McMahon, Steve Young, and then those Miami teams under Howard Schnellenberger and then Jimmy Johnson, where we saw teams start to throw the ball 25, 30, 35 times a game and become more sophisticated in how they threw the football, both from an execution standpoint of the skill set of the quarterbacks and the receivers, but also the complexity of the offenses and the route trees. So that's been a long time. This isn't something that just popped up. It wasn't like for a few years, hey, Ronnie Brown at Auburn and Cadillac Williams are successful running the Wildcats, so some teams are catching on and doing that, and it's a little gimmick to add on to the offense. No, this has been pushing 50 years, 45 years that this has been trending in this direction. And because of the speed of the athletes and just the skill at which they can throw and catch the football, that is so far beyond what it was going back to the times I'm talking about. Watch a college football game from 1978 and watch them throw the football. I just think it's entertaining. Yeah. People enjoy it. It's entertaining. It takes advantage of the athleticism. What positions do most people like to watch? Now, I try to push against the trend to a certain extent and highlight offensive lines. I don't know if you've watched me too much, but I feel bad for offensive linemen, for example. I try to give them credit. I try to list their names as much as possible because they're doing the hard work and nobody, I'm looking at, somebody mentioned a few minutes ago, athlons. I'm reading my athlons the other day. I'm on a flight and I must have read through about 10 or 12 teams, and athlons being a standard of college football coverage most of their offensive breakdown would go through quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. And then at the end, they just say, so-and-so team brings back 3 offensive linemen. Wouldn't even name them. They would name backup running backs, and they wouldn't even name offensive linemen unless the guy was an All-American. That's a little side note that annoys me. But I just think that the passing game is just too fun to watch, and too many people are enamored with throwing the football. It's just too entertaining. And it, again, the evolution of the athlete speaks more to the passing game and serves the passing game more than it does the running game.
Is it the death of the fullback?
Oh, we've already seen, if not the death of the fullback, we've seen it, that position go on life support. How many fullbacks are out there? It's not a whole lot of them. Yeah,
I mean, not a whole lot of them. Even, tight end has, tight ends don't block anymore. They're a receiver.
Yeah, basically, the tight end has become a receiver, or at the very least has become primarily a receiver, but a bigger body that can kind of help out if you want to run the ball out of a passing formation, or you just want to get a chip on the defensive end on his way in his route. Yeah, so the tight end has changed considerably, probably more than, I think the linebacker position has changed immensely because of the lack of running and running between the tackles and the proliferation of the passing attack, that the linebacker position has become, no longer can you have Dick Butkus in the middle of the field at 6'3", 250, clogging up, shedding a few blocks and clogging up tackle to tackle. They got to sprint, they got to run, they got to cover people. They're basically a bunch of glorified safeties to a certain extent. Your safeties and linebackers are pretty similar players, more so that at any point in the history of college football and the NFL, because they got to cover, or you just take them off the field.
Yeah, exactly. I thought about that the other day, because the two linebackers that I remember the most that really impressed me were Ray Lewis and Brian Urlacher. And I thought Ray Lewis was the best because he was so physical inside with the running backs. But now if you put them in today's NFL, Urlacher fits in better because Urlacher can go sideline to sideline, while Ray Lewis can decapitate someone running the ball. But he's too big to chase down a super athletic tight end, much less a wide receiver.
Yeah, Ray Lewis probably snuck in just at the right time to, even though there wasn't much more passing in the NFL near the end of his career than there is now. It was more about formations and the complexity of the passing game and these quarterbacks being mobile, that he didn't really see as much of that as what we see today.
Yeah, exactly. I think, in the past it was always 2 runs and a pass. Now NFL teams go for 3 passes and they'll go for it on 4th down. So, but it's fun. It's fun. I like the way, but I do miss sometimes, the smash mouth style, kind of like, think of the first Alabama, their first national championship, to the one that won it last year, how much it's changed, the physicality.
Jay Barker in Alabama won a national championship in 1992, and Jay Barker threw for 18 yards in that game against Miami in the Sugar Bowl. And they scored 34 points, and they won the national championship by 3 touchdowns. And Jay Barker completed 4 passes for 18 yards. As recent as the 2009 Alabama-Texas national championship game, Greg McElroy threw for, I might be off by a yard or 2, but he threw for like 59 yards in the Rose Bowl in 2010. And Alabama won the national championship by 16 points.
Yeah, no, I think the game has evolved huge leaps and change in the last 4 or 5 years. In these last, I've noticed the biggest change, because you can still think of teams from 10 years ago. It was still Smash Mouth. Smash Mouth started dying out about 6 years ago. And, rules changing and hindering defenses has also played a big role in that. But I'll let someone else call. But hey, thanks so much for answering my question. It makes a lot of sense. And I have to say, go Hogs before I leave.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Bye.
All right. We will continue on here at the Voice of College Football. Got David Greenshield coming up here. David, welcome to the show.
Always a pleasure to speak with the man that gives college football its voice, the great Mark Rogers. Hi, and how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, David. Good to hear from you as well. What's going on?
Well, I wanted to comment just real quickly on what you were speaking with the last call about the change in football from, more of the I formation, spread backfield, teams, trying to, win games by running the ball in between the tackles versus, spread formation and what we see nowadays. I think he touched upon it at the end. I think he just got it in under the buzzer there. You guys were talking about the evolution. I think the rule changes coincide with this perfectly, because, one of the things, and we both watched games from the 80s, even into the 90s, and I've watched some games even back into the 70s, is, what bottom line, Mark, is called pass interference or a personal foul today versus what wasn't called pass interference or a personal foul over that time frame. I mean, they just totally changed the rules to where, the penalties nowadays that wouldn't be called back then. And I think that's just a huge part of it. I think that's got to be put out there, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, prior to 1978 in the NFL, and I admit I don't know the timeline in college football, but when it comes to most things, while the NFL has copied college football in the last 5 to 10 years, prior to that, it was more so college football following the NFL. Prior to 1978, yes, defensive backs in the NFL could just flat out just grab receivers and throw them down on the ground at any point on the field. Basically, the reason they didn't do that was because you risk losing track of the receiver or being too physical or trying to go for some kind of kill shot that you're going to lose track of him and he's going to run away from you. But otherwise, that's when it was instituted that you had one hit on the receiver, and that had to be within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, and completely changed the passing game, along with more liberal blocking rules for the offensive linemen in the NFL. Because they had to keep their hands inside the arms of the defensive player, and basically had to, when you were a little kid and you learned, what blocking was in football, and you would kind of stick up your knuckles against one another and kind of block with your elbows out. That's almost what they had to do back then. They couldn't use their hands and grab and hold and do the things that they can now to protect the quarterback.
Well, you remember one of the last great, I think back in the 70s, wasn't it Mel Blount that was known for that, like, bump and run,
absolutely,
kind of grab the technique that, I think of the guys from the 70s, that couldn't play today with their style, like the great Jack Tatum, legendary Buckeye, of course, and in Mel Blount, or even like a Ronnie Lott. Their style of play, it would be very difficult today for them to do what they did from the 70s even into the 80s. I mean,
when the Steelers, I was just going to say, David, when the Steelers and the Raiders were having their great rivalry in the mid to late 70s and fighting it out for Super Bowls, they played in AFC championship games in 1974, 75, 76. Basically, between George Atkinson, Jack Tatum, Willie Brown, but specifically the first two, they were almost like hockey goons. They one of their great missions was to chase around Lynn Swan and make life miserable for him, just to take every cheap shot they possibly could, rub his nose in the ground, just lay on him, push him, knock him down, do anything, throw forearms at his helmet. They would just chase him around the field and just intimidate him.
Yeah. That's the crazy thing about watching old time football games, just the physicality, you know, and and you know what, though, that's one of the, I know that there's an attraction to football with the high scoring, but I think that, you know, one of the other major attractions that's always been to football is the physicality and the hits and that too, which is, you know, kind of lost. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's an element that's just really missing. And I do miss it as a fan that kind of saw the end of it and then into the transition to where we're at today.
It's too bad, David, that these guys aren't, and I'm speaking like fantasy land kind of stuff now, but it's too bad that they're not invincible physically, because it would be great to go back and just let them play like that, because there is an entertainment value. Again, take away the physical abuse and not wanting to see guys get injured. Certainly, that's most important.
Right.
I love watching a safety come across the middle and headhunt a wide receiver and just lay a forearm right into his, you know, under his face mask and just knock him flat on his back.
Sure. The big time hits are one of the reasons that all fans love football. I mean, I think that's always been one of the biggest draws.
Yep.
But yeah, it's just at a different point. Hey, I wanted to get to the Buckeyes, Mark. I enjoyed your coverage yesterday. I saw you had Hellwagon and Gerdeman on. Boy, talk about the longest recruitment in the history of recruitment, with JTT. I just have to say, I think that this is, you know, I think the guys talked about it the other day, just a tribute to Larry Johnson, who, I mean, bottom line, the two best hires in the Meyer era, I've always said, were Ryan Day and Larry Johnson. And I think that goes without saying. You know, I mean, obviously one's the head coach and the other guy, I think, is the best defensive line coach in the country, in my view. And I think the run of going from Boza to Chase Young, it just, I mean, you know, again, it kind of goes back to Ohio State's reputation of sending these guys to the NFL. It was such a draw for him. And I am just so excited the way this defensive line is set up coming into the year. I actually thought coming into this season, and I know you've done a lot of the position rankings, and I think I've seen one that has Clemson as the best defensive line coming into the season. Is that most of the position rankings that you've seen as far as that goes?
Yes.
Okay. I think with these four defensive ends of JTT, Sawyer, and then I still have hopes for Zach Harrison. I thought Tyreek Smith was playing great football at the end of the year last year. I think we got four top-notch defensive ends, Mark. And I'm just, first of all, I'm also excited of 3 years of JTT and Jack Sawyer going forward. But, yeah, I mean, defensive line, too, Mark, it's one of the major needle movers in college football. I always say that. You know, one of the best things about the 02 team is that team had a great, deep defensive line. And that was the one thing I think now Urban has had is this just run of defensive linemen, you know, because of Larry Johnson. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah. So while we talked offensive football with you and the previous caller in regards to that driving the offense, obviously, then what is most important is stopping offenses, is putting points on the board and preventing points. Well, it's most important that you get to the quarterback. So, you know, a number of people commented on yesterday's show once we diverted to just looking at Ohio State in 2021, and a lot of questions and comments came in that you may have seen involving the secondary. And do I expect the secondary to be better on its own? Yes. Do I expect the secondary to also just look better because the defensive line, for as good as it was last year, could be that much better this year? Yes, because the best friend of a secondary is the defensive line. I got as ridiculous as pointing out when the quarterback's on his back with a football in his hand, I could be covering whomever, because if if the quarterback's on his back with a football in his hand, just got sacked, well, then the wide receivers can be 20 yards wide open and they're not getting the football. And to a lesser degree, if the quarterback's under duress and can't get a clear shot and a good throw at that receiver, then you've just completely upgraded the position in the secondary. Just made their jobs immensely easier.
Well, as the old line goes, best pass defense is a pass rush, Mark. I agree with that, and especially if you can get home with your front four. I mean, I made the case that the 18 defense for the Buckeyes was terrible, but I've always said that I would have loved to have seen Nick Bosa and Chase Young play together for an entire season. Even though we had problems on the back seven of that defense, with the linebackers and with the secondary, I think a Bosa Young combination would have been really good. Now, I don't know if that would have changed the results of Purdue, which, we just got caught in a bad situation there that night and everything kind of went wrong and the roof caved in. But I just think with Bosa and Young, I just think our defense would have been a lot better over the course of the year that year. So, but I will say, though, the ideal Buckeye defenses are the ones where, and I think this probably goes with most defenses, is where you have the best of both worlds. And that was the great thing about 19 is we had, Chase Young up front, and I thought we had a top-notch secondary on the back end with, guys like Arnett, Okuda, and Fuller, and those guys. So I still think, even though I have really high hopes for this defensive line, every great Buckeye defense I've seen since the 90s has always had that top-notch cover corner. And I will add to my friend from Alabama that called in, as far as DBU, 6 first-round draft picks since 2016 for the Buckeyes. I will add that. So,
do you agree with my assessment that those, though, would be the 3 programs to look at in the last 5 years?
Well, I thought it's kind of been a race between Ohio State and LSU, really. I would put Alabama up there. Alabama's had to run a lot of positions. I mean, I think of, defensive line, linebacker, and other positions. But yeah, they've had a really good run of corners. I know recently, although I get back to Minka Fitzpatrick, I'm trying to think of some of the other guys. I know that they had another corner, I think, that went in the first round, I believe, last year. No, they had a first-round corner this year. I know they did. That's right. From the championship game, he was a pretty good player.
Sure, Patrick Surtain. Yep.
Right, Surtain. Yeah, the name escaped me there. Yeah, because his father played football, right?
Yeah, Miami Dolphins, Southern Miss.
That's right. That's right. Hey, one last thing I wanted to get to, Mark. NIL real quick. And Dave's commented a little bit of this on his podcast. I don't know if he touched upon it, but I guess going back to one of the older lines in the history of lines about money being the root of all, fill in the blank. And we've all heard the line before. But what do you think? How do you think the NIL can affect college locker rooms from the standpoint of once you get money in there and you have certain players, getting sponsorships and other players are not, just what are you hearing about what kind of divisions that could, or just what are your thoughts on what kind of divisions that could cause and maybe issues that could cause going forward?
I think I threw it out either on a call-in show or just a live stream just a few days ago, and maybe just on Twitter, that I threw out a few, while I'm supportive of this measure, and I am a true capitalist and believe that these young men deserve and have earned the right to earn additional money, that I had listed out a number of possible issues, and that was one of them. And then I was asking whomever had seen the post to add anything that they had thought of as well. But I mentioned exactly what you're talking about right there. That so on the surface, you would think, okay, everyone has a fair shot at this. Everyone will capitalize on this based on their own resources and ingenuity, but also based on their own performance level that it would make sense that the better the performance out of the particular player, the more opportunity that they would have to earn money, and that would be
Right.
the biggest factor in this. But there are going to be other factors in this that could cause, again, even though it's equal opportunity for everybody to go out there and earn a buck in any way they possibly can, I would think, I don't anticipate it being a huge issue, but I think that there will be isolated issues that could affect relationships and locker rooms. Anytime money's involved.
I think that yeah, that's what I was. That's where I was going with it, Mark.
Yeah,
is down that road. Is once you get the dollars involved, I think this puts a little bit more again on the coach's plate to kind of deal with these situations too. That's going to be interesting to see. How they work with it, right?
Yeah, it's that was one thing I raised, is exactly the point that you just made. And then also, now this isn't going to be something that is going to be reported and out in the open, but I guess there could be situations in which a particular product, a particular corporation, business could offer money to a high school athlete going into the collegiate ranks with the understanding on the down low that we will give you this type of deal if you choose this school, because this school is the school we promote or our company CEO supports. And again, it's not going to be reported like that, because that would be an NCAA, not that they're significant anymore, but a violation of recruiting practices. But that's certainly possible.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how the boosters, because there's always been a feeling about you've heard this in the past, like the sleazy boosters out there that kind of have their claws in these programs. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out with those folks, because those are the folks you got to think that, they're probably going to maybe be a part of this, right, Mark? Some guy that owns a company that wants said athlete to come and advertise for their company, and they can make money off of that. Right.
But as long as the student athlete is earning, in quotes, whether that be by signing something or appearing somewhere, as long as they're earning that money, we're going from something that was once against the rules to something that is fair game and within the rules.
True. Well, like I said, remember where the devil's always in the details, Mark.
The devil is in the details. You've stated that most accurately concerning this topic. And yes, so for said booster, instead of just wadding up the money, and I'm going old school on this, who knows what the transfer process is of these funds today, but loading up a wad of money in a bag and giving it to the athlete or shoving it in his locker. Now could simply be, I'm still going to do this for you, but to make it all above board so everybody's good, do X, Y, and Z. Sign some autographs, sign some jerseys, appear down at the car dealership, whatever it may be.
Right. Well, just something interesting to watch and monitor going forward. It will be interesting to see. As always, a pleasure, Mark. You take care of yourself.
Thank you, David. You as well, sir. Appreciate it.
Take care.
And I will also say that it's, I got to say that I was taken by surprise. Not that I should have been surprised by this, but I didn't give this a whole lot of thought. I think you guys know me well enough, most of you, that I'm focused on the football and not necessarily when these type issues and circumstances come down the pike, I have to address them, NIL. But I don't give it much thought beyond the questions that are handed to me by all of you. So had I given it some thought, could have been easily determined, okay, the players are positioning themselves to capitalize on this immediately That's smart. And that's exactly what many of them did. These players at Florida State, I saw that. I saw Bo Nix aligning himself with a iced tea, I believe. So right out of the gate, July 1st, boom, the news hit. This particular player's connected to this company and that particular group of players from this school. They have their, and I didn't really look into it that much, but I thought July 1st was going to hit. And again, I didn't give it much thought. And then we would start to see, okay, this happened. Now what's going to be the response to that? What are the schools going to do or the conferences in response to this or that? But it's all fair game right now, as long as it's above board and there is some type of work being done. Let's put it that way. All right, let's move on to our next call. Here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hunter, I'm calling back again. I don't know what exactly happened there.
That was my call-in system. Just dropped everything.
Okay, well, I apologize, but I did not get to hear your response to my question.
So let's see that question. Oh, that question was about DBU.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. So again,
yes.
I went back just to set it up for everyone. Hunter had asked about DBU and gave the context of the last 5 years and also relating it to not just production at the collegiate level, but how well the players have produced at the next level. And unless I'm missing something, historically, I think Florida's got a case, USC's got a case, Texas, Florida State, Miami, and others. But if we're talking the last 5 years, I think there are only 3 schools that have been far and away the producers of the best talent on the field collegiately and then moving on to the next level, and that's Ohio State, LSU, and Alabama.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, let's see. I did catch a little bit of what your last caller said about that. And I can just say from the Alabama side. And I think there's a name that a lot of people will forget. You had Patrick Surtain of last year. You had a place for Dallas. What's his name? I think of his name right now. What's the kid that from Alabama that plays for Dallas?
Are you talking about just in the last couple of years that plays for the Cowboys right now?
Yeah. He plays for Dallas right now. And he came from Alabama. He's a defensive back.
You're talking about
Not thinking the same. Rob,
Trevon Diggs?
Trevon Diggs.
Okay.
Xavier McKinney. You have Xavier McKinney. And then you have Williams. What's that kid's name? What's that kid's first name? I can't. He plays for the Bills. For the Buffalo Bills. As a defensive back. He came out of Alabama. But, he didn't emerge until his junior year. Is when he really emerged as a NFL type prospect. He wasn't a big. And I know LSU has somebody who's had some success in that. So as Ohio State, you have talk about Akuda and some of the other guys. Now I'm always going to be partial in this question, but I really do think the answer is Alabama. As far as who is DBU, I think it really is Alabama.
Well, I think Hunter, Alabama gets hurt because the program's been producing at such a high level at just about every position that there's not one that you can really point to and say, that's the position. That's the one. They're just recruiting out of their minds and developing wide receivers or defensive backs or defensive linemen or whatever it is. Wisconsin offensive line. You know, there are certain schools you go directly to a certain position group and say, wow, Wisconsin offensive linemen, Stanford tight ends, Notre Dame tight ends, offensive linemen. Obviously, as we go to the elite levels, then there are more positions to go to. But Alabama is at the very highest of that example, above Ohio State even, and Clemson, where you can say, where, aside from quarterback, would there not be an argument that Alabama is right there with any other school in the country to be considered DBU, wide receiver U, offensive line U, defensive line U, anything you want to put there, running back U?
Yeah, you know, I understand these kind of questions are always going to be, you know, subjective, but they're just kind of fun, you know, fun little discussions to have. But I'm going to ask you this question because I haven't got. I mean, I know a little bit on the backstory of this on the Alabama side, and I know you're an Ohio State guy, and you talk to people on the Ohio State side. What do you think the major factor in Jameson Williams transferring from Ohio State to Alabama was? I know Alabama recruited him really highly when he was in high school, but I don't see after that national championship game, and he had some production in that game. I really wonder what the motivation for him to transfer to Alabama was.
I'm going to take a shot at this, Hunter. So, although Alabama has had the premier wide receiver collection in the last 3 or 4 years in college football, for as good as Ohio State and others have been, I don't think there's any argument. Alabama has been the best, especially considering those 4 first-rounders in the last 2 years, all phenomenal talents, all produced at a extremely high level in college and are now getting the job done. The 2 that were drafted a year ago in the NFL produced their rookie seasons.
And if I might,
yep.
And if I might add, real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt. But if I might add, I just think this is an insane statistic. 3 of those guys signed in the same exact recruiting class. 3 of those wide receivers were signed in the same class. I think that's bananas if that happened.
And this may seem like a ridiculous comment, but if people really looked at the statistics, and I like to go beyond the statistics, not just take those verbatim, but put it into context and actually watch the football on the field. But if you do both, Devontae Smith has put together a career that could be argued as like an all-time great career, like one of the greatest players, regardless of position, in the history of college football, that he's that good and his performance was that great on the field. Okay, so you're talking about Alabama, despite these other schools, Ohio State in particular, that have produced great wide receivers, that in the last 3 to 4 to 5 years, Alabama has been the best. Okay, but they did lose the 2 first-rounders. And if you look at what's coming back, the only accomplished wide receiver is John Mechie, caught 55 passes last year. Slade Bolden had a nice run late in the season. He caught about 25 passes, but they don't have a whole lot of experienced talent coming back. They got a ton of talent.
Well, Slade Bolden had some good production.
Yeah, I said he caught like 25 passes, something like that. But if you look at Ohio State, they've got 2 just complete studs that are definitely their 2 starters. And obviously you're playing 3 or 4 wide receivers most of the time. But I think Jameson Williams, so we have to consider when most of these decisions were made by these athletes were after spring practice, where they got a good feel for where they stood. And Jameson Williams knew where he stood, and maybe he was 5 deep, 6 deep at Ohio State and knew he wasn't going to get a whole lot of reps. And it was going to be another season of 8 or 10 catches versus going to another elite school. So imagine staying on the same level, if not going obviously to the number 1 program in the country, but seeing that even though they've got this ton of talent in the wide receiver room, it's not experienced except for two guys that he might be able to get to play at the same level with one of the very best, if not the best, obviously, team in the country, but help them where they're lacking a little bit. And I hesitate saying lacking. I think you follow me. The production's not there, the experience, but they're loaded. I just think he saw an opportunity there where it was pointed out to him and it was obvious to him where he stood at Ohio State, and it didn't look real productive for him to stay there and not get many reps on the field.
Yeah, and I can see that line of thinking. I could just tell you what I've been hearing from the Alabama side is that he's been doing very well in practice and done very well in show. But Ajay Hall I think he's going to be a starter coming out, and I don't know where James Williams will come out, in the starting lineup. I don't know if he's going to be in front of Slade Bolden or not. But you have some positions to fill on that side, on that position. But I think we can pencil in as a starter, and I think everything else is kind of a question mark because you do have some really talented guys coming in as freshmen, and then you can sort of pencil in Slade Bolden to some extent. So we'll see. I'm all for it. If he can help us win another championship, hey, come on. But I was really hoping we would have got him if he was in high school and he ended up coming into Ohio State. I was kind of disappointed in that, but I'm glad that he came, and I've seen that he's seen an opportunity to where he could, use his talent to, here. So I have no problem with it. I'm just excited to see what this new wide receiver group can do.
So, Hunter, your first thought was the same first thought I had. Jameson Williams left Ohio State, entered the transfer portal, and conventional wisdom thinking would be, okay, well, a guy of that magnitude that has that much talent but is behind 4 or 5 guys because he's in an elite school, he's going to go find a place where they need wide receivers. Maybe he's going to go to Iowa or North Carolina State, or, just pick a mid-level school that's still a football power, but they play more in the top 25 or 30 range that probably doesn't have the talent at wide receiver. And he's going to be some stud and gobble up 75 receptions. That he was looking for a place like that. So my initial reaction was Alabama. He's going to Alabama. Well, they've got the best wide receivers in the country. Well, okay. They did lose the 2 studs, and besides Mechie, Bolden just came on near the end. Maybe he sees an opportunity there. I'm sure it was an informed decision, and he talked to Nick Saban and the coaching staff to know what the opportunities were. And as you mentioned, Hunter, it's a good point that you made, not to cut you off, Hunter. You made a good point, just to extend on your point, that the relationship was already there from the recruiting process originally.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that played into a big, and I think what they said to him was, hey, come on over, we got, we have, you have some skills that that we can have, that you can, plug in and play here. I think they just kind of re-recruited him to Alabama, where he could have gone to like the schools like you just mentioned, and probably would have been an instant starter in one of those schools. It's just interesting to see how these kids, get recruited to a place, commit to them, and then things don't quite work out, and they're still able to go to elite programs. You've seen that a couple other times. You've seen Brandon Turnage, who was an Alabama player who went in the pro, and now he's at Georgia. Playing at Georgia. So I like the versatility. I thought when the transfer portal first hit, I didn't like it, but now I'm kind of gearing toward not having a problem with it, because I think kids should be able to explore whatever opportunities they can maintain for themselves. If we really, as fans, really care about the kids themselves, we have to allow them to have opportunities wherever they can find it. And if that success is going to land in the NFL, even if it's not at a premier school, I watch the draft every year and just blown away about some of the schools that we don't think of as NFL talented schools, putting kids into the NFL every year. And so if the kid can capitalize on the opportunity where he can shine and make the next level, I think we have to allow that for the student athlete perspective.
Yeah, I don't like in a lot of ways the way college football is going, but because I want to see players play for the same school and I want to see them in the NFL 5-10 years later and just say, okay, he was an Alabama player. He was an Ohio State player. He was an Oregon player. And there's a certain amount of loyalty that I enjoy that we no longer can enjoy, that 10 years ago we could say so-and-so is always a Miami Hurricane. And there's a certain level of loyalty and attachment. But that's just me being a fan versus what's practical and what's good for the athlete is that for the longest time, we've kept them separate from the rest of society, from the rest of the way everybody else is treated, to be able to make their own choices, go where they want, make their own decisions. We've kept them under lock and key that, boom, you signed a scholarship and, you got to follow that. Oh, your head coach, he left and took his coaching staff and all the people that recruited you and you built relationships with and were one of the reasons why you signed with this school, but you got to stay here. It's not American. I don't like it, but it's not American. And these players should have the opportunity to choose where they want to go. Now, I will say, because of their age, that I'm sure many of them, it's going to prove out, are making hasty choices because they don't exactly love the situation they're in and they think that the grass is going to be greener, and that's not always going to be the case.
Or you see it in the case of like Henry Tolatola, who ended up going to Tennessee, and when Jeremy Pruitt left, it's that same kind of thing with Jameson Williams. You seen the relationship is already there. He said his father came out in an interview and said that they weren't going to make the same mistake twice. And so, you see this, and there's pros and cons to everything. And we're just going to, but I think at least from my personal feelings, I think it should be all about what's best for the student athlete. And as much as from fans, we're going to have things happen that we don't really like from a fan perspective. I think we have to keep the athlete first. And then that's kind of my take.
I got you, Hunter. I completely agree. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
I just want to say one more thing.
Sure.
The reason I think your program is so successful is because of the fact you don't dabble in some of the things that the NFL is now dabbling in. And I think there's a lot of different, like shows like yours are going to increase over the next, I think, going to explode, is because of the way that you do your program. And it's a breath of fresh air. Good to come on here and listen to you and the people that you have on, and not be bombarded with all this crap. And so I really appreciate that aspect of your program. And I just wanted to say that in light of the conversation that we had earlier.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. And I hope you're right about the show exploding. That would be phenomenal. Thank you, Hunter. Always like hearing from you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. The next call coming up is dealing with the NIL. I'm not going to read the whole dissertation here, but we'll get in the phone call from Seth. Welcome, Seth, to the Voice of College Football.
Stein.
What's up? Oh, it's Seth Stein.
Yes, sir.
I didn't see the second part of that.
Years.
Absolutely. How you doing?
It's my first. Doing well, thank you. It's my first time calling.
Nice.
And,
I appreciate the support.
Thank you for taking my call.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. So I'm sure you've heard the Darren Ravel speculation on the Dan Patrick show that Arch Manning to make $10 million his rookie year, and I don't know if he will or not. I mean, he could. I get his logic, but let's just say, even if it's 1/10 of that, 1 million. A question is how's that going to affect other? Not so much like, because he's a once in a generation recruit. There's not too many people like Arch Manning that people are going to, seek out to pay them $10 million and endorsements for whatever. But let's say someone like Gunnar Stockton for Georgia, a 4-star. He's like, I think 4th or 5th in his position, like ranked 40 or 41 nationally. Would someone like Gunnar Stockton be discouraged to recruit or, commit to UGA if he could get, $500,000? Let's say instead of Georgia, hypothetical, some guy, I'll make up a name, Austin Taylor played in Memphis, and he was the same kind of deal. Ranked number 41, the 4th best quarterback in the country, and he decides to go to Memphis instead of, Alabama or Ohio State or Georgia, because he'll be the top dog and he get maybe more money and more endorsements. Do you think we'll see a lot more, people kind of on the cusp of being a 4 or 5-star choose smaller schools because they could potentially get more in endorsement deals and things like that?
I talked a little bit about that the other day, because I think it's all conjecture to this point, because you can look at it from at least 2 vantage points, and the 2 major ones would be to think of it the way in which you're approaching it, that, okay, there's not a fight for all this money amongst all these high caliber athletes at Memphis or
Right.
Tulsa that there is at Alabama and Auburn and Tennessee. You can look at it that way, that
Mhm.
you're the star and you're in a pretty large city in Memphis. But at the
Right.
same time, how big is Memphis football even in the city of Memphis versus
It's I live in Memphis, so I mean it's not very big, but since Fuentes came and left, and then we had Norvell, it's gotten but still, I mean, I think our stadium seats 40,000 people total, even if it's full.
Yeah,
So,
so
yeah,
if
it's
you
not
go
big of a
to the
market,
city
obviously.
of Memphis, if you go to the city of Memphis and grab everybody who considers themselves a college football fan, you're probably still going to find more Tennessee fans, Arkansas fans, Ole Miss fans. I know from working down
Right.
there for 7 years that Ole Miss has a huge fan base in Memphis. And I got to think that there are Alabama
Yeah.
fans and Kentucky fans in Memphis more so than Memphis football fans.
Right.
And I think he would find the same
Well,
in New York City for Rutgers. Rutgers is right there. It's a Big Ten school. They should be Rutgers fans. But the people in New York City, I bet there's the largest contingent of Notre Dame fans, Ohio State fans, Michigan fans, Penn State fans in New York City than Rutgers fans. I guarantee that.
Right. Well, you're saying that kind of opportunity might not be here in Memphis, but so even if Gunnar Stockton, like say if Vandergrift, JT Daniels will be gone after this year, even if he, I think his first available year to start would be 2024. Even if Vandergrift went 3 years. So you're saying that I just don't think they'd be willing to sit out for 2 or 3 years, turning down, 300,000, 500,000 to just, wait it out and behind someone else for 2 or 3 years, hoping they might take, 1 or 2 years or, to maybe or not make it.
I would think
that's a lot of money for a college kid.
I would think, Seth, that there would be, and I might be thinking about this the wrong way, we haven't seen it play out, but there would be even more incentive than there is now for these kids to jump ship and go somewhere else, because unless you're Arch Manning, let's say he signs somewhere
Right.
and he's the backup quarterback for a year, but people are still interested in him and therefore he can sign deals and be in the spotlight. Most people most businesses, they don't care about backup players. They don't want to pay a backup quarterback, even though he's a 5-star, still the backup quarterback.
That's my point. Yeah.
So the backup quarterback better go.
That's my point. So if a 4-star knows he's going to be a backup, then why would he choose to go to the school? If he thinks I'm going to be a backup, why not just go to like Memphis or, like you said, Tulane or, somewhere where I can start and, be the top dog and maybe get $200,000 while I'm doing it,
That's a worthy point. What the incentive used to be.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, absolutely. What the incentive used to be, of course, was just, do I want to play? Number one. And number two, do I want to set up my NFL career? I got to be on the field to set up my NFL career and make money. And it's easier to do that over the course of 2 or 3 years rather than just have one season that's my only season to showcase myself. If I sit here at Ohio State behind a couple 5-star quarterbacks, why not go to Illinois and play, show what I can do?
Right. Well, so do you think is it going to help the smaller schools, or because everything I've heard there, the rich are just going to get richer, and I don't know, I kind of see it the opposite way. What do you think?
All right. Going back to where there's population, and therefore anytime there's population somewhere, there's money. Memphis, Tulsa's a fairly large area. So if we look at the major, I'm contradicting myself to a certain extent, the major group of 5 situations,
Right.
You do have Memphis, you do have Tulsa, that's a fairly large city, versus places like, where in the world's Louisiana located? It's in Lafayette, right? Louisiana. And App State in Boone,
Right.
North Carolina. And Arkansas State.
Yeah, it's my father's alma mater.
Oh, yeah? So
Yes.
you do have a
the App
pretty
State.
large gap between some of those UABs in Birmingham. Pretty large city, capital of the state. No, they're not the capital of the state. But anyway, the largest city in the state of Alabama. Versus, some of these other places are in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying it's more dependent on the geography, more so than the school or the name. Like maybe potentially if it's a bigger city, then they could maybe land a player who could potentially make $100,000, his freshman year, or
When it
as
comes
opposed
to
to even a
this,
better school that's in a worse location or a less populated location.
when it comes to this NIL business, I am not proclaiming to know anything that's going to happen. I'm just conjecturing. But if all things are equal, and you've got the opportunity to go to Memphis with a probably one of the 30 or 35 largest cities in America, or go to Lafayette, Louisiana, population outside of campus of 25,000 people. Therefore, the businesses just don't have the money. They don't make the money to provide that kind of opportunity. Where in Memphis, there's business all over the place.
Right.
I would think that could be a decide. I don't think it's going to be like deciding factors all over the place where all of a sudden Memphis is going to be great and Louisiana is going to fall off the map and be horrible. But I would think that could factor into some decisions.
Maybe 1 or 2 more 4-stars for Memphis.
Yeah, go to UCF and play in Orlando.
Or maybe a 5-star.
UCF's in Orlando. Great place to be, to make money.
Okay.
To have opportunity.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, Mark.
Hey.
Thanks for taking my call, and it's good to talk to you after 2 or 3 years.
Absolutely, Seth. Good to hear from you. Call back anytime.
Yes, sir. All right, man. Take it easy.
All right. Who do we have coming up here on the Voice of College Football? Next up.
Hey, Mark, Reasonable Gump here, man. How you doing?
Okay. I have learned not to try to read the voice recognition. That has burned me just way too many times. I just say, this is the next person up. Because you are demagogue transfer. Listen to this. Porn. That's what came out.
All right. I'm not sure if a loud thump made it through the receiver, but that was my head hitting the desk.
It did not. No,
Okay.
I didn't know what was going on. I thought I lost you for a second. What's on your
Okay.
mind? What's going on?
Well, at least it got the word transfer right, because the topic I wanted to talk to you about was the transfer portal. So I heard you talking about it 2 callers ago. So, well, not transfer portal, more like the just new transfer or lack of transfer rules. So you were, correct me if I'm wrong, your stance right now is that you don't really like it as a college football fan, that anyone can just pack up their bags and leave at any point they want to. But you think that like the system we had before wasn't really promotion of like, the American ideals and, freedom of basically doing whatever you want to.
Absolutely.
Am I correct?
Yes. So if the world was perfect and we all were just college football fans and got to do what we wanted to do and dictate the way things we wanted them to be, I enjoy the loyalty on the college football level as opposed to the NFL, where you flip on an NFL game. Oh, that guy's played for 4 teams. That guy's played for 3 teams. I loved the purity of the collegiate game where you knew that Archie Griffin was an Ohio State Buckeye, always will be. Whatever he does in life, he went to the next level, played. He only played at Ohio State, and of course, we can fill in that blank with thousands upon thousands of players that only played for their school, and therefore their fan base could always attach themselves to whomever.
Mm-hmm.
Fill in the blank. Greg McElroy, always Alabama. Derrick Henry, always Alabama. Great NFL player. Alabama fans can be proud that he didn't start out at Missouri. Then he went to North Carolina State. Then he finished up and had a banner year at Alabama, and we won the national championship with him as a junior, but he had been at 2 other schools. No, Derrick Henry's purely an Alabama player. We're losing that rapidly. There's going to be, there's still going to be players, obviously, that just stay at one school, and there's still going to be plenty of them, but a great portion of the players, I don't know what percentage to pull out of my head, of NFL players 10 years from now, we're going to, 30%, 60%.
We're going to have multiple schools.
Multiple schools. And we're not any longer going to say, I don't know what these players are going to say when they announce themselves on Monday Night Football, when they now say, Joe Blow, North Carolina State. I guess they'll just pick their most recent school.
It'll be the one that they graduated from.
Yeah, I just love the purity of that versus conventional, logical me, the capitalist, the American me, that everybody should be treated the same and should be free to make their choices and do what they want and go where they want, and should be able to leave a situation, even if it's a dumb decision, leave a situation and go be a student and a football player somewhere else. That's the American way. So I'm supportive of it. I just don't like it.
So let me tackle this first, and let me take a small detour here, because to comment on what you said about trying to figure out where did this player come from in the NFL draft. This is kind of already happening, or starting to, because LSU fans have been having to fend off Ohio State fans the last 2 years who keep trying to claim credit for Joe Burrow, which I think
ridiculous.
kind of hilarious, because Joe Burrow was not that good when he first got to LSU. That was his training at Ohio State. So I think Joe Burrow is 100% a product of Joe Brady at LSU. But I'm just saying that we're already getting a taste of it right now, of what's to come, about people arguing who deserves credit for this great player getting drafted in the first round.
The Ohio State fans argument.
That's not really what I want.
The Ohio State fans argument there, and I don't agree with it, but the Ohio State fans argument is, number one, he received his degree from Ohio State. Number one. Number two, he spent more time at Ohio State. But obviously, he did absolutely nothing to contribute to the football success at Ohio State, and did everything at LSU.
I don't think any of them are really serious about it. It was just more when you released not this past draft, but the one before where Joe Burrow was drafted, and you were like, your video was just like, you know what, it's not even a competition. The SEC it absolutely owns the NFL draft, and all and like it was more just them trying to needle SEC fans that they quote unquote owned the first 4 picks or something of the draft because they were including quote Ohio State trained quarterback Joe Burrow as number 1, and then I think Ohio State got like 2 of the next 3 players or something in the draft, something like that.
Chase Young,
but anyway, that's right. So I'm going to kind of disagree with your take on this not being American.
Disagree with
because
me? Really? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you on this. So
yeah,
here's the thing: is no one has or had ever told these players you can't transfer. No one. It was never illegal for anyone to transfer.
True.
They had to pay a penalty. They had to sit out a year, or they had to go to JUCO. But that option was available, and some people say, "Well, that's not really an option." You know, you're inconveniencing them. Yeah, they were inconvenienced because their choice that they went to, it didn't work out. Just like a lot of times in real life, a choice you make for your life doesn't work out, and you got to take a back seat, and it's going to take you longer to get where you want to go, and you may have to go take another job you don't want to. And all these sort of things start happening. But guess what? You can still get there. Cam Newton is the prime example of that. He went to Florida, couldn't start there because Dan Mullen's a moron. And he had to go to a junior college, came to Auburn 1 year. I think he was the first pick in the NFL, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Another great example, I believe, Russell Wilson, 1 year, Wisconsin. Was that right? Or did he transfer to Wisconsin, or did he just only start 1 year? Okay, he did transfer to Wisconsin.
Yeah, he was the starting quarterback at NC State. Yeah. Only 1 year at Wisconsin. Yep.
Two examples right there. It can be done. I did not necessarily see a huge negative for having a penalty to pay for quote making the wrong decision. Say, well, they couldn't have known about that at the time. You know, they couldn't have known that this coach was going to get fired or he was going to up and leave. Well, in real life, you don't know. You know, in real life, you don't know that Hurricane Katrina is going to come destroy your whole town. You don't know that it's going to flood New Orleans and destroy your business for a while. These kind of things happen. I think that was actually more reflective of real life. And again, I don't think it was anti-American because no one told them they couldn't. There was no law in place keeping them from transferring. They could have done it. Now, I think that we basically open it up and say, you can choose to go wherever you want to with no consequences if you don't like it there. If you don't like it there, no problem. Change your mind, go somewhere else, and no repercussions, no kind of penalty you got to pay, nothing. Well, that's not to me indicative of American life, society. That's less of a resembling of reality. That's to me teaching people or these college kids that there doesn't always have to be repercussions for big important choices they make in their life. And I think choosing a school to go to is a very big, important choice, or at least it is for 99.9% of people. For these athletes, it's not because they can just choose where they want to go. You know what? I don't like the food at this dining hall. You know, I think I'm going to go over here. Oh, I forget whoever that LSU guy that went to Florida for like 2 weeks or something, didn't even unpack his bags, and then thought, you know what? I don't really like the humidity down here. I'm going to hop up here to Georgia instead. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's stuff like that. That right there is the primacy, and of course it happened immediately as soon as his stall started. That right there is an example. There's no penalties. There's no prices to pay for making the wrong decision. Okay. So that's why I kind of think the other system we had was better.
Okay. That penalty,
I'm done.
though, is artificial. So in real life, the life that you lead, the life I lead, and most of the people that are watching, the ramifications are based on reality, not just some rules that are put in place. If I quit my job, then the ramification is that I have to go find another one, and I have to be marketable enough and have to have skills to find an employer. So I pay the consequences potentially. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. It's a risk that I took to be able to do that. But those barriers or ramifications that you're talking about are artificial, are rules that are put in place. What you might be forgetting is that there's the law of supply and demand. So if this was the real world and such wide receiver at Ohio State says, I'm fifth on the depth chart. I don't like it here. I want to leave. I'm going to go to Alabama. But Alabama said, we don't need you. Go look somewhere else. And if he couldn't find employment, quote unquote, employment, then he's out of luck. But these athletes understand, if they have any awareness, what their value is, that they can go somewhere else. So that is actually playing out like the real world. They just have a skill set that's in demand. Otherwise, they'd have a bunch of schools say, we don't got room for you. Sorry, we're good.
I agree the limitations are artificial, but I would fire back at you that everything in college is artificial. Everything. With it, college, the whole idea of it initially was to create an artificial environment that's not only giving people who go an education, but it is to sort of give them experiences and give them skills that they will then apply to the real world. College itself is artificial. Every single barrier, every single their living situations when they live in the dorms, the food they eat, just the rules they have to play, their curfews, boys and girls, and not in the same dorms. So, I mean, everything, or the entire environment of college is artificial. So the NCAA placing this or having had this penalty on there, while yes, artificial, it was still, in my mind, a designed. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think the people who made this rule, the NCAA, had any intentions of trying to teach these kids life lessons. I think they just wanted to preserve loyalty in sport, and I think it was actually head coach driven, more likely, because head coaches don't want to have to deal with good players on their team just up and leaving, because they have a mood swing, on Sunday. But that's why. So I didn't necessarily have a problem with it being artificial because it kind of has to be. I mean, college isn't the real world. It's about to be closer for these players since they're going to start making money. But until they're not, these players are not paying a mortgage, probably. Most of them are probably not paying for school supplies for their kids. Most of them, so they're not in the real world yet. I just didn't have a problem with there being a lot of with barriers and limitations to things that would sort of mimic the idea of what they're going to be facing. I agree that it sucked. It probably sucked for a guy to come to Alabama because Nick Saban convinced him that, he's only recruiting him because he thinks he can start. And then he gets here and he realizes there's 4 or 5 other running backs better than him. And the likelihood of him starting before his senior year is really low, even if he works his ass off. And then it probably sucked for him to realize, you know what, if I do want to go to, I don't know, Oregon or something, where it's still a brand name school, but I think I could start out there pretty quickly. But now I got to lose an entire year to do that. So I'm still only going to end up playing 2. So that would probably be better than if I stayed at Alabama. May not even get to play more than half a year here. Yeah, that sucks. But the real world sucks too. So I don't know. It doesn't necessarily make me like really that kind of. And I'm not mad or really, banging my head about how players can just up and leave whenever they want to. I do wish we would have kind of had a middle ground. I think college football seems to want to overcorrect itself a lot. I'm sure you would agree with me on that. There's a lot of examples like targeting, for instance. When they first started targeting, they were throwing targeting penalties if you breathed on them wrong, because they were trying to overcorrect the head, the helmet. I think they overcorrected. I think they overcorrected the playoff system. I don't know why they felt like they had to jump all the way to 12 and make bye weeks. I don't know why they could just take it one single step forward with 8. But I think this is an overcorrection. Instead of having any penalties at all, they're now having no penalties. You can transfer 10 times in a single season if you want to. No one cares. I think it should have been everyone can have one transfer, one with no questions asked. You can transfer anywhere you want to and start immediately. But after that, then there's no exceptions. If your mom or something, or your grandmother's sick or something back home and you want to transfer back to be close with them, well, you can do that, but now you got to wait out a year. There's no exceptions now. That's what I think they should have done. I think they should have given everyone one free pass and said, but then said they'll use it wisely because you're not going to get another one. That's what I wish they would have done.
Well, I actually made that suggestion on more than one occasion. It's exactly what you're saying right now.
Well, because great minds think alike. So.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, it is a new world. There's no doubt about that.
So one last thing, I think the last caller touched on it, but I wasn't really listening. So do you think what Nick Saban said about the rich is only going to get richer? You think that's going to predominate, or do you think it's going to the talent's going to spread out a little bit more? Which one do you kind of lean towards on that?
Because of NIL. You mean?
Oh no, I think he said that more about the transfers.
Oh, the transfers.
Yeah.
Well,
because his quote, or some, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said it's along the lines of, if players, quote unquote, bad players, leave the top elite programs because they couldn't play, so they're going to go somewhere else, and then the players who get accepted and get to transfer to top programs must have been elite to start with. He said, "Is that the rich getting richer? I don't know. You tell me." Basically saying that that all the elite players are going to can get to transfer to the top programs, and the ones that transfer out of them are the ones who weren't playing anyway.
Well,
they weren't starting them anyway.
I would tend to defer to Nick Saban. He has to deal with this, and I would think that he's thought about it a lot longer than me and has a lot more wisdom regarding a lot of things, and that included than me. But I think there is conventional thought that players are looking for opportunities, first and foremost, to earn a living. And that used to be just a path to the NFL. Now that includes money-making opportunities in college. And as I mentioned to a caller, a few callers back, I would think, except for the very rare exception, Arch Manning would be one, that you only do that by being a starting prominent player. You don't do that by being the third string quarterback at Ohio State, even if you say, hey, I'm a 5-star. Well, if you sit for 2 years, who's going to pay you that much money because you're not putting up stats or you're not on the field playing? You might as well go to Kansas State and be their starting quarterback. Even though there's a lot less opportunity overall, you're the starting quarterback at a major school in the Big 12. So it's not Ohio State, but it's Kansas State. You're a starting quarterback. I would think that line of thinking leads it to there being distribution of the talent.
So, yeah, you're right. NIL might actually be a counter to what Nick Saban said about what the transfer portal could do to the sport. Because the scenario you're laying out is that people who can't start somewhere but are still pretty good, maybe they don't want to share their starting spot or something, they may go to one of these lesser schools like Kansas or Arkansas or Georgia or something, and because they might have a like a money making opportunity there, and they could get to start and show off their skill for the draft. So win across the board.
How many players, let's say at wide receiver at Alabama, that are the third, fourth, and fifth options that are catching like 14 passes in a season could go to, like the previous caller mentioned, and we were trying to select group of 5 schools that are placed in fairly major markets, could go to Memphis and catch 70 passes in a season for 3 years and make all sorts of money with business opportunities in that city, versus being, again, as long as you put on the Alabama
I'm guessing
jersey.
A lot.
Yeah. I understand that as long as you're putting on the Alabama jersey, there's a certain level of opportunity regardless. You could show up at Joe Blow's car dealership, and even though you're the backup guard, there's still people that are excited to get your autograph because you play for Alabama. I get that. That still exists, unlike other places. There's nobody going to show up for the backup guard at Memphis's autograph signing at the car dealership, but they will at Alabama, or fill in your school, a football crazed school area. So there's
a long time ago, you had a live show talking about like top 10 or 20 jobs in college football. And one of my big parameters, not the only one, which I was accused of multiple times, but one of my big parameters that I used to judge jobs was location. And I think location is going to play a very big role in NIL. No one really thinks of Miami as what would be a huge market or a target location for the best players in the country. But once this kicks in, Miami may be the best location for players wanting to get their name and image and likeness anywhere on the biggest stage as possible.
See,
Miami and USC have got to be just the biggest markets possible for stuff like that.
So you bring up another point that I've discussed a few times in this issue that we're discussing with NIL, but I've served it up from both angles. I've served it up from the angle that you just did. Miami and Los Angeles, they are the largest cities that have major football brands that also have an entertainment, obviously Los Angeles, but even Miami, an entertainment cachet to them as well. They're glitzy cities with a lot of opportunity, celebrities, all that, in addition to major football brands. You could say the same thing about New York and Rutgers, but nobody cares about Rutgers. So Miami and LA, okay, they're unique in that way. But on the flip side, in Columbus, so I'm going to go to the largest cities that I can think of that have major football programs that are kind of the only game in town. And Columbus, Ohio might be the best example. Maybe Austin, Texas is a good one. Austin, there's a lot of nightlife, a lot going on. It's a growing city, and it's the University of Texas, but they don't have professional sports. And again, Columbus, Ohio is a great example, and there's not many. Which one's the better locale? Because on the surface, it looks like Miami and Los Angeles, but somebody made a comment to me that USC was whining and dining JTT, Tui Moloau, the Washington defensive end who signed with Ohio State, that they were flying him above Los Angeles. And I said, to see what? All the people that are going to ignore him for the next 3 years at USC and be watching the Lakers and the Dodgers and the Rams play? Or go to Columbus, Ohio and be it?
God.
Yes. So there's that too. There's the 25 or 40,000 empty seats at Miami football games in South Florida because people don't even know that they're playing. And then I have Miami fans excuse that as, well, there's so much going on. You play 7 games at home a year. We're not talking about people showing up at Major League Baseball games every day. 7 games a year. They can't even show up for that.
Yeah.
They always have to be at the beach. They always have to be at a nightclub. They can't go to the Miami NC State game. It's only one of 7 that you got.
Everything that's about to come out of my mouth, absolutely none of it I'm claiming is fact. This is all stuff I remember from watching Colin Cowherd one time. There was some sort of bowl, not the big Miami, Nebraska, like national championship games, but there was another bowl a little bit later or something where they played, and like Nebraska brought like over 100,000 fans, and Miami brought around 15,000. And he was using that as an example of what you're talking about right now, that Miami football is like, I don't know, 8th place in their own city, because they got all the other sports and they got the nightlife and everything else.
Their fans seem to be scattered all over because I'm not going to disparage them, because on the flip side of that, it seems like they got fans all over the place. So I keep hearing about how many fans they have, and I experience it here. And I see all these other YouTube channels with all these Miami fans and Miami broadcasters of sorts, YouTubers. But on the flip side, yeah, we see the lack of people in the stadium. So I don't know what the truth is. I think there's truth to both.
Well, I'll tell you something else that will start on this NIL stuff. That would probably interest you in particular. So I think a lot of these players, not a lot, but some of these players may start actually making like YouTube or other like social media type accounts, since they would be able to be monetized for their channels now. I think there's one player like doing it right now in like Texas Tech or something, but that might interest you. That might be a particular interest to you, since you like bringing people on the show and stuff. If you could actually bring like current NCAA players, from like, let's say you brought an Ohio State player, a current Ohio State player, on your show for a little bit, to talk, that would be really cool.
Yeah, I would either have to do one of two things. Either I would have to get money up front to say, okay, I'm going to take a calculated risk that if I can get Ohio State starting running back to appear with me for 20 minutes every week, and I got to pay him X number of dollars, that I can go get a sponsorship that's going to say, oh, with the Ohio State running back on there, yeah, we'll pay for that. And so they'll supplement that and take care of that. Or maybe I just, break open my own bank and I take the risk that it's going to pay off, and I go for it.
Or the third way would just, if you get them to agree to whatever percentage monetary or monetization comes from that video, that they get a certain cut.
Yeah, well, the monetization on YouTube for videos is so small that that's not going to cut it. There would have to be some type of sponsorship involved there for sure.
Right. Okay.
Because for as much as we think college football is huge, and it is huge in the grand scheme of life and other things that are more popular out there, just go around to college football videos on YouTube. There are people, obviously, that have YouTube channels that are much more impressive and popular than mine, and they still don't get ridiculous amounts of views for videos.
Oh no, man! You get some random girl showing people how to put on eyeshadow. She's going to get
exactly,
sometimes 50,000 views instantly.
That's my point. I watch. This is kind of a guilty pleasure of mine. I got into at some point here in the last maybe 2 years, watching reaction videos on YouTube. Just people watching music videos and reacting to it. If somebody would have told me about this, I would have said, well, that's the stupidest thing in the world. It's like watching people play video games. Why would you watch somebody react to music?
I've never understood that.
But I do it. I do it. Mostly because I'm the fan of a particular artist. But so I do this, and I see where they get hundreds of thousands of views for just sitting there watching a music video and saying, that was awesome. And and I'm like hitting my head against the wall thinking, I'm killing myself to get 5,000 views on a video. When I say 5,000, that's a good video. And these people can get hundreds of thousands, if not millions of views from sitting there watching somebody else do all the performing and doing all the content, and they just react to
all they're doing is sitting in a chair and watching.
Yeah.
Well, on my way out here, since you said that, because don't worry, I like doing it too. I like looking at ones that are like big moments that I've seen and I had a particular reaction to, and I just kind of want to see if other people have something similar. But watch rugby player reacts to NFL hits.
Okay.
Yeah, it's entertaining.
Yeah, that kind of stuff is cool. Very cool. All right, sir.
All right, man. You have a good night, okay?
Yeah, you too. Appreciate the call. Absolutely.
Bye.
All right, let's hit a couple more calls. Definitely. I'm a little bit behind here. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Jeez. Hey, what's going on? I think the problem with football and sports is something that wrestling is facing right now, an identity crisis. If you go back and look back in the days, you had guys like Tim Tebow who were relatable people, who were relatable men that were organically grown. Nowadays, I think nowadays you look at it like this: you don't have people that you can relate to in modern sports, and same goes for wrestling and anything like that. If you look at wrestling, for instance, back in the Attitude Era, you had guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, The Undertaker, Kane. You had, and I don't mean to say this, badass men that were organically grown by Vince Russo. And I think the argument that people make about, just have great games and all that, as Vince Russo once said, former head writer for WWE in the Attitude Era under Vince McMahon, he said, you could have the greatest matches ever with the most blandest characters ever and wouldn't drag that many views for next week. But you could have characters with the it factor, put on a bland match, and drag 100,000, 200,000 views the next week. I think in modern college football, it's harder and harder, and sports in general, it's harder and harder to relate to these people. Like for instance, it's hard for me to relate to Trevor Lawrence, to Joe Burrow, to any of these guys that, like Burrow, transferred. For me, I'm a diehard wrestling fan, and I like relatable people. I grew up Attitude Era. I loved, The Rock, Stone Cold, and The Undertaker because I could relate to it.
Okay.
They were simple men that I could relate to.
Okay, Chase, let me ask you something. Okay. I know the names that you're talking about in wrestling, but I don't know enough about them because I don't care about wrestling. So bring it back to football, because you just mentioned Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow, two individuals, current players you cannot relate to. Who could you relate to whenever, years ago?
Someone like Tim Tebow. I could relate to Tebow, who was down to earth and humble.
Okay, wait a
I
minute.
could relate
Okay.
to somebody like that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not arguing with you because your feelings are your feelings and they can't be argued. They're valid if you were able to relate to Tebow, but not Burrow or Lawrence. But I'm not seeing a real difference. Like Joe Burrow gave a tremendous Heisman speech and talked about the poor communities in Ohio that he feels for and contributes to. Like, I don't see anything with Joe Burrow that doesn't make him relatable. Trevor Lawrence, I'm not dissing Trevor Lawrence. I just don't have any examples of anything that he's done off the football field that I can relate to. But
To me, they're just modern football is bland. It's bland, and it's gone way too political. It's gone. Last year's football season was the hardest football season I've ever watched because of how much politics is shoved down your throat.
well, sure.
I mean, it just
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I
Me
mean,
too.
I watch football for football. I don't watch it for BLM. If I want to watch BLM, I'll turn it on Fox News.
Well,
I don't watch football to get news topics. I don't do that.
Did you catch my first? Did you catch my
old-
first 15 or 20 minutes on here? That's all I did is rant and rave about that.
Uh-huh.
I'm right with you, Chase.
For me, there's an old saying that sports is the last great frontier to escape from the real world to get immersed in the sporting world of pure sport. I feel like nowadays it's just turning into a tool that can be used by political figures, by politics and all this. I mean, every time BLM would come on, I'd change the channel last year, and I did that quite frequently. I think I got more entertainment out of watching Sanford and Son than football last
I love
year.
that
And
one.
I'm being God's honest truth.
Yeah, Lamont.
I mean, Sanford and Son at least.
Sure.
At least
Grady?
Sanford and Son went
That's good
shoved down
stuff.
politics.
Sure.
Stuff.
I can always bust up at Grady. That guy's hilarious. Sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just last year. It seemed like last year football and sports in general had an identity problem because they were searching for everything and grasping at everything to bring in, and that included politics. It's almost like sports is suffering from an identity problem. If they have to go to the lowest of lows and bring BLM and shove it down your throat, that's almost to me like sports in general is suffering from an identity problem. That's just what it seems like to me. And the worst offenders was NASCAR. They were the worst offenders of it all. But for football, how can you take something and shove away a good chunk of your audience to push an agenda that is incredibly politically biased? And I don't want to bring this up, but I will, an election year. It just seemed coincidental they'd do it in an election year. I won't go down conspiratorial route, but it just seemed oddly funny that they would do it in an election year, shove BLM down your throat during a football game, during football. And the amount of times, hell, if I had $1 million every time they talked about George Floyd, I'd be the richest man on earth.
I'm right there with you, Chase. And that's why I said to somebody earlier, one of the earlier callers who said football is business, I said, wait a minute. We used to all complain, or most of us would complain when we did accuse football or sports of being too much business. But actually, I would rather have it be about business. It's become political and about agendas. They've even made bad business decisions and offended people like you and me and millions of others and cost themselves money. They're not even acting like business people. They're pushing a social agenda that goes beyond business.
It's becoming a political war zone. That's what sports is becoming. It's becoming a political war zone, sports against their fan base. How can you grow yourself as a sport if you're accusing your fans of all this outlandish crap? How can you do that and have a guy like LeBron James essentially accuse an entire group of people of being racist for supporting one political figure? It just seems like sport has declared war on the fans and declared war on the number one people that make them big. How can you be a business mindset in football when you're running away your customer, your consumer? You're running away your consumer by shoving a political ideology down people's throats. You're shoving your consumer and customer away. That's the dumbest business decision move that you could possibly do. That's a quick way to the graveyard of business. That's a very quick way to do it. And it just seems like sports in general has a massive identity problem. It's an identity crisis that they don't know who they are. Sports does not know who it is. Who is sports? At the moment, you'd be hard pressed to find a consistent answer. And when you have that, it's almost like, I don't want to say that these investors are creating it, but it's like these investors are forcing sports to run away the fan base. I mean, that whole Washington Redskins ordeal. Name me at least 150 Native Americans that found the Washington Redskins name offensive. You'd be hard pressed to find that name offensive in the Native American community. I mean, I even saw an interview by a Native American. He said that was his favorite team.
Yeah.
That was his favorite team, and he loved it.
All right,
just
Chase.
Seems to me.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
I appreciate the call. I got two other calls, and I need to take them quickly. So I appreciate everything you get to say. Thanks so much for calling. Always call back.
Thank you, brother.
All right, I'm going to take these other two calls. I've been on here for 2.5 hours plus and did a lot of stuff before this. So I'm going to take these calls. I don't like to leave people hanging here. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Hello?
Hello, Mark?
Yes.
Okay, listen, I got a different spin on something. Okay? This is my take on this. So, you got so many people that can go to Alabama or Notre Dame or anything like this. I think what is going on now, like say you can go to a school, FAU, and you have a big following on like TikTok or anything like that. I think it takes like everybody thinks Ohio State or Alabama's going to get richer. I beg to differ. I think now if you're like a big fish in a little pond, and they said, "Hey, instead of coming to Alabama and you're going to have to wait 2 years, why don't you come to Jacksonville State or wherever, and you can make a name for yourself right away and make the money." You understand what I'm saying a little bit?
I understand what you're saying, Frank, but I think your pond is way too small. I think your pond is basically a bathtub. Your pond is way too small. Nobody cares about any players, albeit I have all the respect in the world based on their talent, their ability, their hard work, and all that. But we're talking about the real world. Nobody cares about FAU and FIU. Nobody cares who the starting quarterback is. There's nobody that's going to pay them. So I think you've gone down the ranks a little too far. Now, if that player is going to leave Alabama and go to NC State, maybe there's some opportunity. Or if he's going to leave and he's going to go play at Indiana and play on TV in some big games and Sure, it's nothing close to Alabama, but it's still a Big Ten school, and you get seen on TV, and you play Ohio State and Michigan and all these other teams. And again, I do not pretend to know how this is all going to go, but I just think even the people within those communities, if you go, as I said to a previous caller, if you go to Memphis, Tennessee, and we're talking about Memphis, not FIU or FAU, we're talking about a team that's been the best in the group of 5 right before Cincinnati took over. Most of the people in the city of Memphis, I guarantee it, are Tennessee fans. They're Arkansas fans. They're Ole Miss fans. They're Alabama fans. They're not Memphis fans.
Well, let me ask you in this recruiting aspect. When you have someone, you could say, hey, you come down here and we'll sign you up for $100,000 or whatever. Can Alabama offer that? Or can Jacksonville State, I think it's a big, it's changing the aspect, I think, in college football where it's not about the football. Now it's about like the what you can do for me kind of. And I love your show. I think I'd like to listen to you. I just think it's changing the aspect of the football. Now I believe they should get paid because college football has been making a lot of money on these guys' backs, and their scholarship is not going to do nothing for them. But it just, I think it's in a dark hole. I think maybe, I don't know. I'm sorry if I'm babbling, but I just like to see what you think about it. I love your show. Thank you.
I appreciate the call, Frank. Thank you so much, and call back anytime. All right. Unfortunately, the calls are mounting, which is a good thing, but just understand we're pushing 3 hours now. We got George on the line. What's going on, George?
Hey, Mark. Greetings from Portland, Oregon.
Oh, beautiful Portland.
Yeah. I'm holding down the fort. I'm afraid to leave.
Are you
the place might fall apart?
You may just be the last one.
The cornerstone. It reminds me of Sodom and Gomorrah. One Lot left and God rained fire and brimstone on them. I'm afraid if I leave, it's over.
You may not be too far from the truth with that comment, George. I'm telling you, you may have nailed it right there. I'm
thinking about it.
You're going like biblical forecasting on us right there. End time prognostications.
Who was the caller?
Yep.
Who was the caller before the last caller? The guy that was trying to express himself about all the things wrong with the world. Who was that?
Was that was Chase? Chase is a Florida fan. Gators fan.
Listen, I understand. I know at this time people are struggling to express themselves, but I could have summed that whole conversation up in 2 minutes. And this is what he was trying to say. You can whip me, you can beat me, you can chain me up, but don't mess with my college football,
And that's where I get to the point of cutting people off because, as you well know, I let people talk and talk and talk, and I enjoy the conversation. But when they start repeating themselves over and over and over, that's when I have to kind of wrap it up and say,
I know where he's coming from. I know where
I do too. I agree with everything he had to say.
Right. But it's just really hard to put into words,
And I've said this about 5 times tonight, but I'm only going to say it one other time. Through most of this, as college football has become more and more huge in sports in general, most people's complaint has been it's become a business. The almighty dollar rules everything. But we've even gotten past that point. Right. These organizations, these sports aren't even making sound business decisions. They're even sacrificing dollars to push these stupid social agendas.
Right.
It's crazy.
Hey, listen, though. Mark, this is the point I was going to make. The guy's trying to express himself, and it's really hard to put into words, right? But what he's trying to say is this. We're confronted with all these big social issues. It's none of our doing. It's just in our face. Social issues, right? And it's affected our sports now. They're putting it on the back of T-shirts. or just the whole thing. And here's the problem I have with that, right? I just said you can whip me, beat me, chain me up, but don't mess with my sports, right? You can put me on house arrest with no charges. You can make me breathe carbon dioxide. You can forcefully lethal inject the world, but don't mess with my football, right? How about this? You can abort 1 billion babies, drink blood, enslave mankind, but don't mess with my college football. So that's the reason I'm not going to do this on college football channels, because we have bigger problems, bigger shit we didn't pay attention to. We deserve to have it affect our sports. Like Rome is burning and we're fiddling watching sports, But other than that, I love sports. Hey, listen, I want to start a class action lawsuit. I'm going to need your help because you have a big channel, but I want to start a class action lawsuit on behalf of all the players. We're not playing 17 games, okay? We'll play 14 max. So we're going to have an 8-game season in the playoffs. Fuck this shit. Are we crazy? 17 games? Are you serious? I'll file the court papers tomorrow. Mark Rogers versus the NCAA.
Wait, you assume that I'm on board with you?
Somebody's got to protect the players.
Well, I'm all for protecting the players and protecting their health. We understand that this 17-game season is going to be extremely rare.
We're just going to go to WWF rules. We're going to fake like we're blocking and running. I mean, this is ridiculous. You can't do it. You cannot do it. Have you ever seen a football player after a hard game like Notre Dame versus Miami? You can't do this 17 times.
Well, there's some thought.
Versus Georgia.
There's some thought.
Let's add a few games to the schedule.
There's some thought out there that that they threw out 12 just so that they could compromise to 8 in the playoff.
Exactly. No, well, you know what? Okay, never mind. At least I said it once. At least somebody was thinking of the players. There's got to be a compromise somewhere. You can't do this. 12. How about getting a bye in the playoffs for football? Oh my God. And what about if they do what they did with North Carolina State in baseball and we get to the national title game and they go, we're sorry. Somebody walked by somebody yesterday that wasn't wearing a face mask. They can't play no more.
I know. Oh, it's so ridiculous.
Yeah, we sent the team back on the airplane. They're not here no more.
It's so ridiculous. It's just beyond insanity and has been. Yeah. All right, George. I'm going to get to these last calls here.
All right.
Thank you for calling, man.
All right, love you guys.
I always appreciate it.
You're welcome. Bye.
All right, let's get to this call here coming in. Don't know what this person wants to talk about, but they are certainly welcome to the Voice of College Football.
Hello, I'm on the air there.
Yeah, what's going on?
Hello?
Yes.
Oh, hello, Mark. I'm pretty new to your show there. I'm really into football. I used to play when there was a mic, and me and my buddies, we actually the other day ended up just going down to the field, kicking it around, and just running a few drills. And I was just kind of wondering, how much football do you think we're really going to get in the summer there? Because I noticed that in Liverpool they're not doing too much, and then there's a lot of social issues still going on over there in Switzerland, and so I don't really know if they're going to really have a Premier League this year,
Well, I think with Liverpool in particular, I think I can't really vouch for the football that's played there, but every 50 or 60 years or so, they produce a pretty good band.
Oh, yeah. I always noticed that Beckham and Pele, there's only ever one per generation,
Yes. Absolutely.
I mean, you got these mates, you got Swanson, and you got the young guy coming up in Brazil. I mean, he's got legs on him with the $1 million legs for sure. If he gets into Pepsi or Red Bull or something, he's going to be living very large. Well, I mean, anything could happen,
So I, like you, I'm concerned about the situation there and us getting our football season off and running here this summer.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been so bloody good. It's crazy that get people to sit in the stands for 2 halves. It's going to be quite a struggle, I think.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us from on the other side of the pond.
Oh, yeah.
We appreciate
the call. Thank you
for
taking me, Mark.
Yes, you have a great...
You're a brilliant lad. You take care.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. That would be a showstopper right there. That was something else right there. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you so much. Yes, we'd love to be heard in Europe as well here at the Voice of College Football. On Tuesday, we have a Oregon show that's going to be live to be determined, most likely at 7 o'clock Eastern time, 4 o'clock on the West Coast. Oregon Live on the Oregon channel at 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific, and of course, Nebraska Live tomorrow night at 8 Eastern, 7 Central. PayPal, Venmo, and Cash App. Mark Rogers TV. Please search Mark Rogers TV. Just go to PayPal, Venmo, or Cash App if you'd like to contribute to the channel to keep us going. Also, keep in mind that Amazon is where many of you do your shopping. So please use the Amazon link that we provide. Anytime you use Amazon, please use the link in the description section of the videos that we provide. It's the same shopping experience. It doesn't cost you a penny, not a penny. And it's the same shopping experience. Just put the link somewhere where you will remember it and shop Amazon using the Voice of College Football link. We've got a Voice of College Football website, voiceofcollegefootball.com. Please go there and register for free at the top. I am working on providing pick'em leagues and fantasy football leagues. Don't hold me to that. I'm doing my best trying to put that together as well. Would love to have pick'em leagues where we can predict the football games and compare our results and give giveaways. And then also have a fantasy football league for the college football season. So I got to get my rear end in gear to get those put together in addition to all the content that we provide on 22 channels. Here at the Voice of College Football. We got Patreon. Please join us on Patreon at 17 cents per day, exclusive live streams. And for anybody that joins me on Patreon that's in the live chat, you understand exclusive live streams per request. All you have to do is request the live stream, and I will give you an exclusive live stream, insider look at the Voice of College Football. My predictions are there as well, which would have made you money pretty much any year. Not every year, but certainly in 2021 and other years as well. Right here at the Voice of College Football. See you on the Oregon channel Tuesday at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific, and Nebraska 8 and 7 Central. And we will have all sorts of videos coming your way as well as we do our Ohio State defensive breakdown. And you'll see that right here. See you next time. That will be tomorrow.